Welcome to Generation Digital Workforce, the podcast that's here to explore the role of robotic process automation and other digital technologies. Whether you're just getting started or you're looking for advanced strategies and tactics, if you're curious about where human and digital workers are coming together to transform the future of work, then this podcast is for you. All right, let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk, and welcome to our podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Al Naqvi, whom I've known for several years. Al founded and heads the Washington, D.C.-based think tank focused on artificial intelligence. His research and specializations are in reindustrialization. He helps companies and asset managers, private equity, ETF providers, and fund managers to improve investment returns in and from artificial intelligence. He's authored several books, including one that's upcoming now on artificial intelligence in asset management and investment, who's going to be published through Wiley. Welcome, Al.
Thank you.
So you do a lot of things. So I'm hoping maybe you can just describe who you are, how you got started in this, and then introduce your firm AI so people can understand sort of where you're coming from.
Sure. So I have a multidisciplinary background. I was formerly an entrepreneur who launched a tech firm, and then I became a corporate C-level executive in a Fortune 500 company, and then I've held several C-level positions, and then turned into an academic side, and then now I've put all that experience together. And, about 5 years ago, launched this think tank group, which is based out of Washington, D.C., focused exclusively on reindustrialization. So what that means is that there are many forces that are coming together, including, for example, quantum computing, artificial intelligence, and primarily AI is transforming our economy. And the change is so massive, and it's at such a scale that it needs rethinking everything, rethinking our companies, rethinking economy, rethinking our country, having a national strategy, having a company strategy, marketing, finance, supply chain, HR. That's what we focus on. So AI provides this knowledge base to companies and agencies to transition to the next era of AI economy. That's what we focused on and have been very successful at that. And knowledge creation, original knowledge creation is how we do it.
So AI stands for?
American Institute of Artificial Intelligence, Washington, D.C. based. Our website is americanai.com.
Gotcha. So as we look at artificial intelligence, we've going through this pandemic, and COVID-19 has had a huge impact on the economy overall, with various shutdowns and reduced capabilities or capacities in many organizations. How has this affected the development and the adoption of AI?
So COVID has exposed the vulnerabilities, especially operating vulnerabilities in many companies. If you divide the set of companies now, we had those who were prepared and those who were not prepared for this event. What it did was, obviously, it accelerated our transition or transformation into a digital economy, and which has left many companies behind. And this creative destruction process has been unleashed. And so companies that were left behind are trying to play a catch up, while the companies who were ahead, they obviously profited big time from this transition. But companies that are trying to catch up, the thing they need to understand is that it's a moving target. So it's not something that's stationary, and since they're coming from behind, they have to be extra careful. They probably have to invest even more, and they have to develop those instincts that are necessary to compete in this new economy. So with respect to COVID, there are three very important trends to understand. I know that we all know that we accelerated our transition into digital economy. Schools are online, we're online, offices, work, everything has gone online. But at the same time, think about this, what it's doing, that means that it's producing large amounts of new data that we never had before. Now, that's something which is very important to understand, that this digital acceleration means tremendously new data that we now have, which means that AI um, as our future is now even more solidified than ever before because of the new types of data that we have. So from distribution data to school data to conference calls data, all of that data, it provides significantly important information. So that's one, the first important implication. The second is that there's a demand pattern change that will go on across the economy. So the ability to go walk into a retail store, walk through the aisles, pick up things, try new clothing, plus, when you're going out to work and you're traveling, all of those things are different now. Demand patterns will change. You will be buying things, or you are buying things from the screen of your mobile phone and your computer, your laptop, which also implies the role played by recommendation engines, which means that there's a new cognitive connection that's now has been established between you and those recommendation engines. So in some ways, artificial intelligence economy is being unleashed in such a powerful way because of these demand pattern changes, which also means that we will be buying more lowest common denominator products in some ways, because because again, what recommendation engines are bringing back to us is what we are most interested in, likely because it's matching our interests with different products. The third thing is very important is decoupling. So decoupling and realignment of supply chains, because artificial intelligence revolution combined with COVID developments also implies major geopolitical changes that are taking place, which we are all familiar with. For example, just a few years ago, every consulting company was running with a strategy on why you should invest in China and why you should move your operations to China. But now it's totally reversal of that. Where we will be seeing automation-driven new supply chains forming. So the three things are digital hyper acceleration and transformation into data. Number two is demand pattern changes, and number three is decoupling from and realignment of supply chains. And these are massive change for any company, for any industry, for any sector, and for any competitive dynamic that you can imagine. So that's why it's important to pay special attention to AI. AI is not just a technology, it is a revolution. It is your strategy, essentially.
So you mentioned about this whole decoupling and the automation that goes along with it from a supply chain perspective. Well, building an intelligent automation capability involves thinking differently about work. So what are some of the challenges in adopting AI to support this new way of working?
Sure. So this new way of working at the most fundamental level means automation, but it also means not just physical automation that we were very used to. For example, cars are automation, flying planes are automation, but also cognitive automation. So now you have two dimensions of automation. And in fact, I usually add a third dimension because human work by definition is a social output. It's a social product. And human work results from the combination of three variables. The physical part, and for example, if you're digging a hole, you're doing physical work, maybe a little less cognitive work. If you're doing programming or writing a program, you're doing a lot of cognitive work, maybe less physical work. But both of these works require a social dimension also in work, which means that you're talking to other people, you're cooperating, you're collaborating. So these three dimensions come together to form the new model of work now. And we are humans, we were very good in automating. The first part we automated was on the mechanical side or the physical side. Then we started automating on the social side as we brought people together through internet. And now we're automating on the cognitive side, which is human cognitive skills are being automated. You combine these three is how you build your new automation play. That's how you approach your business strategy. That's how you approach what work is automatable and what work needs to be automated. Now, unfortunately, a lot of us are operating in seven old dimensions, and I'll mention and why we need to push ourselves to this new dimension. First is about we're thinking old economy. We need to understand that the economy has changed. Some of the factors I just mentioned to you. So we need to transition from old economy thinking to new economy thinking. Second thing is that we are thinking about old competitive dynamics. So the way we think about moats and competitive advantage of firms and the boundaries of sectors and industries, that's no longer there. So Tesla and Apple and Google are coming into auto sector. And so are these really auto companies? No, they're not. So the traditional moats no longer exist. I call that techroachment, combined word for, technology induced encroachment. And so the traditional boundaries are not there. The competitive dynamics of sectors and industries are changed. So old models do not exist. Third is old business models versus new business models. So it's not as simple as, oh, we are transitioning from a brick and mortar company to an e-commerce firm. That's old style. That thinking itself is old style. It's not just e-commerce. It's, again, combine three things: social, physical, combination with cognitive. So social, physical, cognitive. That's what your processes are also. So, and the fourth thing um, is old business process to a new business process. An old business process was designed around humans and which typically lack the social and the cognitive dimensions of work. New business process is designed around machine and humans working together, and it has all three dimensions of automation: physical, cognitive, and social. The fifth is old supply chain thinking versus new supply chain thinking. So the old supply chain model was, as we talked about, was different, completely different distribution style than we have now, based on both epidemic as well as the geopolitical developments that we have seen. We will be architecting, and the world will be architecting a new supply chain. And that's what we need to pay special attention to. The sixth is from old geopolitics to new geopolitics. So we have to transition our thinking from how the world was before these technology based what's known as great power competition started, and now where we are, in which new transformation has happened, in which we're pretty much sure that a great power competition has been launched. And the seventh is old discovery versus new invention model. So old discovery was based on human efforts to design and develop new things to innovate. The new discovery model is based on automated discovery, which is far more accelerated, far more experimental, which essentially changes the underlying scientific process itself. So, for example, pharmaceutical companies trying to develop new molecules is done by machines now, in which they will go out and do different simulations to develop or apply different types of learning algorithms that will develop new models. And what happens is that now you have a totally new way to invent, design, and develop new things. So your core R&D process has changed. These are the seven things that are redefining our world, and that are redefining how work is conducted, and that are redefining how we should be approaching and thinking about this new economy.
So as part of that, you mentioned there's all these different dynamics, and you listed quite a few of them. When you're looking at making these transformations, whether it's physical, social, or cognitive, how does how can that be brought in to actually create value for the organization?
So let's divide that question into two things. First, that how is AI helping us? What is it that AI is truly changing? And then we'll talk about the value creation process. So AI changes us in three ways. Number one, it's automation. So automation related productivity improvements, something that Blue Prism does. For example, you provide RPA, which automates certain repeatable processes. So automation is number one. Second thing is it enables us to predict better. And third thing is, as we talked about, that it's discovery. It allows us to discover new things faster. So number one is automation. Number two is prediction. And number three is discovery. In some ways, it's very much like how human evolution happened, in which these are the three things that we had, that we as humans got different than other primates or apes. During evolution, in which there was certain type of physical capabilities that we developed, certain types of cognitive prediction ability that we developed, and certain type of discovery capability and problem solving that we developed that helped us become humans in some ways. So now let's talk about, so these are the three things: automation, prediction, and discovery. Now let's talk about value. When you use the term value, I assume that what you're really implying is that how can you create returns above shareholder expectations, number one. Number two, that you are not harming anyone in doing that. So your ESG part, or your concern as a social enterprise, that you're not creating harm to be a good global citizen. So these are the two things how we approach value. Number one is creating shareholder value, and number two is doing the right things. And in both things, AI, if you think about this, automation, prediction, and discovery is what will drive real change. And how? Because what happens is that if you look at the value of a firm, it comes from three major factors: return on invested capital, number one. Number two is your growth. And number three is your cost of capital. As you play with these three variables, that's what creates value. That's what creates a stock value improvement. So what AI does is, through automation part, it impacts your return on invested capital because it allows you to increase revenues and decrease costs, operating costs. So that's pretty simple. Automation equals higher revenues, lower costs, so your return on invested capital goes up. Well, you can add actually capital efficiency also improves. Number two, prediction. What prediction does is it lowers risk for you. If you think about the definition of what risk is, it's your ability to predict. If you're a better predictor, if your prediction is coming true, that means that you're less risky than someone who's not very good in predicting outcomes, because for them, volatility will be higher. So if you think about that simple explanation, what prediction ability does is it reduces risk, and by risk reduction, your cost of capital goes down, which means that your stock value goes up. The third part is discovery part. Discovery part is it impacts your growth. As you are discovering new products and you are launching new products, and your discovery, your R&D capabilities have improved, that will impact your growth. It will allow you to market, to create, and develop new products faster. When you put these three variables together, you can get a stock value impact that's unimaginable. So you can see that happening with Tesla, which many companies, or many analysts had written off that company. It's a primary example of reindustrialization success that we're observing now in the economy. So this is what value creation means. On the other hand, the second value creation happens on when you're creating value for the world, the social value, and AI has significant applications in social value creation, and your entire ESG, your environmental, social, and governance framework is now really based on artificial intelligence. It allows you to understand what the problems are, and also allows you to solve the problems. And Michael, since we are on this, the third thing I want to mention is, because we just talked about value creation from a company perspective, but value creation from government perspective is very important also. So agencies can apply AI to not only reduce risk and improve their customer satisfaction, but create tremendous citizen value by AI, and we're seeing that in from in many agencies who have undertaken these projects. And this is just the civilian part. Obviously, there are military applications of that, but AI. But just from the civilian part, I think that that's extremely powerful, and the change that will come in the government as well as on the private sector side when combined, a national strategy for AI is an absolute requirement, and that's what reindustrialization is, where just everything around us is changing and will change.
So you mentioned part of that, the discovery, looking for new products and services. I imagine the insights into what you already have and the customer buying patterns and whatnot that can be discovered as part of that are another really big, powerful way that AI can be plugged in by allowing you to take the data you already have and mine it for some of these new insights.
Yeah, absolutely. So the difference between AI and legacy tech and is profound. Legacy tech is, and I give this example, legacy tech is about creating a container, for example, a plastic container in which you can hold water. So it's like that because what the container does is it contains data. Your legacy tech is designed to contain data. So it collects data and then it organizes data, and then you can analyze that data and you can generate reports from that data. It does processing for that data. It's about that plastic container. So what happens is water, your data takes the shape of the container in which it's held. AI is not for data, it's from data, which is different. So now think about that you have a container full of water, and then you have a scoop and you dip it in and you throw the water up in the air. And the shape that water takes, it becomes a new container. So that's what AI is. AI is taking that data and creating infinite number of shapes from that. So you're not bound by the container. You're creating new applications from the data. And as we have this new, all this data that's coming in now in the post-COVID environment, and even before, is now all mineable. And every one of those, insights will transform us in so many ways. Remember the three things: automation, prediction, and discovery. So this data, when you're creating systems from data versus for data, that's what happens. It's creating a system that automates, that learns, and then that predicts and that discovers. And which means every area of business gets transformed. So companies who are not understanding that AI is not just a technology, it's not different than legacy tech, they're at a loss because legacy tech, the old style tech, is not, it's not something, it's not a source for competitive advantage anymore. It's good to have that. Obviously, you need that to do your AI, but that's not the source of competitive advantage. AI is your source of, it's a pretty much exclusive source of competitive advantage now.
So we've been, the things you're laying out are, to me, are a way to expand how we think about this, but some of it can be somewhat academic in nature. What can executives do to actually improve the effectiveness of adopting AI as they're reimagining the work across all these different frameworks?
So you use the term academic, and what I am saying is that executives need to become a little academic. That's why if you look at all the big firms that have been launched and that have done really well with AI, those people are coming from some level of academic background. And the reason is that we have to disconnect ourselves from the world that we were so used to, for which our MBA programs trained us for. And we need to do that mental transformation and to fight our own organizational inertia that stops us from thinking about these things. So, and we also have to transition ourselves from for both boards and especially executive teams at the highest level to transition our thinking from short-term thinking to long-term value creation thinking. Something, for example, we saw what Tesla did, and many other firms are doing that. What again? Let's take a step back now. So, how are we approaching AI right now? Well, we're thinking of it as use cases. We're thinking of it as a tool. We're thinking of it as a technology. We have to stop doing that. We have to start thinking as the entire business transformation strategy, which applies to our company, and then it filters down to every function and every department. So marketing needs its transformation plan, finance needs its transformation plan, HR needs its transformation plan, supply chain department needs its AI-based transformation plan, and they all come together to form this strategy which allows you to compete better and survive in this new world of AI economy where in reindustrialization is unfolding. And so these new competitive dynamics that have been unleashed can only be addressed through planning and combining that creative part, a little bit of academic part with the practical part. So the pragmatic part, if you just focus on that, if you're just focusing on use cases, then that's not real transformation. That is a really very, very tactical way to handle something that requires tremendous strategic focus. It's not an ordinary transformation. It's not an evolution on the evolutionary ladder. It's not the next step. It's a revolution. It's how the entire economy is changing. That's the message that we try to give, that I try to give. Don't think of AI as a tool. Don't think of it as a use case. Don't think of it as a software, a technology. Think of it as an entirely new approach to conduct business. And when you do that, that's when you can recognize that it's not good to have each department going with a different supplier, doing its own testing, its own experimenting on AI. You need to have an enterprise-based strategy, bring in enterprise-based suppliers that can support enterprise, who approach things from an enterprise perspective, who have operating models that go with the software. So you can, someone who can go in and say, look, we know we have the business side also well developed, not just the software part. So they're not just giving you technology, they're giving you an operational transformation framework also. I think Blue Prism does a good job at that. So that's something, because your needs need to be at that point strategic, which also means that you have to have your tech stack needs to have an enterprise-based strategy for transformation.
So some of the things you're talking about is that many of these organizations just aren't thinking big enough. So as they're looking at these things, they're not thinking big enough about what could be, because they're so focused on more of the tactical, short-term aspects of it.
Absolutely, Michael, and nothing that I see that that goes against this part, that if you're not thinking big, you're not thinking, essentially. So if you think that you can bring in your AI to do a use case here and a chatbot here, that's really not transformation. That's not transformation, and that will not help you. You will be using a lot of, obviously, resources, and you're experimenting with 20 different technologies, 20 different suppliers. No, that's not what AI is. First is, you're absolutely right, Michael, that you have to think big. I just laid out all the forces in this 20-minute interview. I just laid out all the forces that are working, so that you can understand the whole concept is for you to think about that this is not an ordinary change. This is dramatic, this is massive. And companies that understand that, whether it's Google or Tesla or Facebook and others, all these, Apple, these companies, they understand these things. And a lot of companies in fintech that understand that. So they're now thinking big, and you have to think big, and you have to think creative. It's not about the old economy. It's not about deterministic thinking. It's about thinking big, and it's about thinking in a way that you can design thinking in some ways, that you can design your future by looking at AI, what AI has to offer.
So when looking at these larger, broader goals that you can achieve with AI and intelligent automation, what would you say are the top, say, three things that an executive should be considering right now?
Yeah. So the first most important thing I think is what you just said is think big. So have a total business transformation plan. That's number one. Total business transformation plan, and stop embracing AI as many firms are doing it, half-heartedly, and doing it in use cases. And if you go back to when internet came, a lot of companies made that mistake with internet. So they thought that it's nothing more than just a website. I don't need my brochures anymore. So I can have people tell me and they know where I exist. They can find my phone number to call. But that's not what internet was. Internet transformed the entire value chain. We know that now. The same way, AI, do not underestimate the potential and the impact of AI. So think big. That's number one, and plan for that. So that's number one. Number two is develop standards in your organizations to embrace this powerful change. Standards means that you need to have organizational standards on how you would bring this technology in, including your tech stack, your enterprise standards, and then building organizational skills to accommodate that, to make sure that you can do that in a very efficient way. So that's number two. Number three is my biggest message is then once you have that is to develop your tech stack. Your tech planning is important now because you're not just designing technology as some supporting function. It is your core business strategy. It becomes who you are as a firm, and it doesn't matter which sector you're in, whether you're in healthcare, in finance, in auto sector, you essentially transform into a tech company. So that means that enterprise-based tech strategy becomes your core competitive advantage. So you have to embrace that. Now, the only thing I would add to that is, again, when looking at suppliers, think about those suppliers who bring in this transformation vision as well as enterprise focus for you, and who are not just pushing for a use case here and a use case there, because that will not add up to giving you a competitive advantage that AI will demand from you. And so, stop thinking of AI as a technology. Think of it as a business strategy. It's a comprehensive business strategy for your firm.
So we've talked a lot, and you mentioned this about the technology, about the tech stack, and whatever. One thing I'd like to bring up that we haven't really talked much about is people. Where do people fit in this transformation process, leveraging AI?
Sure. So one of the things that when we think about automation, this concept, and I initially, when I started my research, I also thought that automation will be a big displacement for jobs. It will automate things and people will lose jobs. And I started thinking about that, but then I realized that human work is the function. What drives human work is the number of problems that we know and that we are trying to solve. So at any time, what human civilization, human society defines what work it will conduct is limited by the problems that we are trying to solve. And what AI is doing is it's expanding the domain of problems that we can solve. So if we're smart enough to understand what that means, and planners, I'm talking about planners that who argue that there will not be enough work, would instantaneously understand that as the domain of problems expands, so would the work needed to get that done, which implies, so where will be the gap? The gap will be in training. Gap will be in skill building. The gap will be in helping people transform and develop skills to this new economy. That's where we need to place a lot of focus on. So people and preparing people in two ways. That was one way is to, number one is reskilling them to develop them and providing them skills, enabling those skills that will help them discover new problems and solve new problems is our collective responsibility as a society, both government as well as corporate America. This is what we need to work on. The second thing is change management. Change management part also includes that making sure that people understand what this technology transformation means and they work accordingly, and that starts from the top, including the board and your executive leadership team, and then your senior leadership managers, middle managers, all the way at the lowest level. So the anxiety about that, my job will be taken away from me should not be there, because if you're doing your job right and you're trying to transform your entire company into this, to embrace this automation, there is so much work to be done that no one should be out of job. The only way people will be out of job is that if we have failed to reskill them, if we have failed to alleviate their concerns and their anxiety and encourage them, and we have failed to encourage them to learn new skills and acquire new skills or provided means to do that. So that's an important part. That's extremely important for us to, and thanks for asking that question, Michael. It's, that part, that gap remains. But again, thinking starts from the top. Board and the C-suite has to have a framework of what this transformation means, a business strategy, the operating model that will go with that, maybe 5 to 10 year plan for how all these things will come together, an organizational change management plan, and then an organizational skill development plan. All of these things should be aligned, and as for us to compete in this new economy. And obviously, we should always remember that the creative destruction forces are always at work. New types of competitive dynamics will develop. Tech encroachment will be a huge part of it, as well as new companies that come from from the left field. We wouldn't know, but startup will come, emerge from somewhere and compete with us. So we need to have that mindset, which means our investment operation is also important, in which we continue to not only invest in our companies, but also probably look for good acquisition opportunities in which we can go and find good acquisition targets that bring AI for us.
That makes sense. So we've talked about a lot today. What would you say is the biggest takeaway that an executive should be learning from this discussion today?
It's big. Think big. Plan big. These are the three things, really. This is not a small change. This is a big change, and for us to refuse to acknowledge that, or to operate in this self-deceptive structure that everything will be fine, or short-term thinking that I just have to focus on the next quarter, I think analysts would start looking at us very, very quickly in terms of understanding that which company has that long-term strategy and which company doesn't, and their valuation models will then crunch those numbers, and our stock values would start really diminishing, decreasing, if we don't have that long-term plan. So it's big, think big, and plan big. Those are the three key concepts, I think, is that it's a great time to be alive, and this transformation, it happens once in a century, and in our case, in my lifetime, it happened with the internet, and now it happened again. So it happened twice in my lifetime, and I'm not 100 years old, so
Well, I think it's a great focus on this thinking big, because it is a big transition. And like you mentioned before, it's like the internet was misconstrued early. and then it started to become embraced for what it really could do. I think we're going to see the same type of thing with AI in terms of moving from a point type solution or a very small thinking to a very large thinking, overarching kind of driver for new business as you go forward for transformation. So I want to thank you for bringing these things to light today and doing it in such an eloquent way with your multi-points that you really had well thought out to be able to drive the points home that you did. So I really want to appreciate you for joining us today and bring out this information.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Generation Digital Workforce. If you want to hear more about RPA, AI, and other cognitive technologies that are shaping the future of work, join us next time as we continue to go deeper on these topics with industry innovators and experts. To make sure you never miss a future episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. And if you've liked what you heard today, please leave us a review. It's one of the best ways to help more people find valuable content. For show notes and more info, visit us at blueprism.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.